there, folks. My name is Dara Star Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. Thank you all so much for joining me here on KJLH. I want to let you know where you can find me. If you listen to me weekly, you are familiar with this information. You can find me on Instagram on the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH. You can also find me on my personal Instagram page at Dara Tucker B. Everywhere else online, I'm at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. Well, we have an interesting topic for you today, and we're going to kind of be walking a little bit of a fine line. I want to introduce you to my guest first, and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about. His name is Greg Bryant, and he is an expert in public relations. He is also a media expert who works in radio himself. We're tending to have a lot of these radio folks on lately, and I think we do that because they're so good at their job.
It's your fault.
It's just so easy to call them up and say, hey, let's have a conversation. So Greg Bryant, thank you so much for being here on The Breakdown.
Thanks for having me. I love the show. I'm proud of you. And let's get into this topic today.
Well, can you tell them a little bit about your background before we get into this conversation, and one that I sort of wrangled you into? So thank you for being willing to talk about something just a little bit controversial today. But I think this is an important and very necessary conversation. So can you tell the folks a little bit about who you are before we jump right in?
Thanks for having me, Dara. Greg Bryant here. Started in radio when I was 14 years old. I'm a broadcaster currently, and I won't tell you which stations currently right now because we're on KJLH having a wonderful time. Training in mass media law early on as an undergrad and in graduate school as well. And it helped me to really navigate the waters of, specifically when it comes to matters of libel and defamation. We'll talk about that soon with your specific topic. But I think that's why you wanted me in here today.
Yeah, I have a passion for subjects like I'm going to be doing some content here pretty soon. You all know I do a lot of these little mini explainer videos online. One of the topics that I like to cover, at least like to weave into the videos that I do, is media literacy and critical analysis of media. And I think there's just not enough understanding about that in this current age. We've got kind of a controversy that's been brewing for a while that I think Greg will be able to speak to in sort of a unique way. And I have my thoughts on it as well. Hopefully we'll get into a robust discussion. Mm-hmm. But what I want to talk about, and you all might already have an idea of where I'm going with this. Obviously, there have been some charges that have been leveled against P. Diddy.
Some would say mogul, but I would say
mogul.
Record industry executive firstly,
yeah.
Then entrepreneur secondly, branching out beyond the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where he made his biggest mark, was in the music business, specifically in the 1990s. Yeah. And we've all heard, well, most of us, what's going on now.
Yeah, there's probably not a person listening to me who doesn't know who P. Diddy is, and at least a little bit of what he's famous for. But obviously in this Me Too era, I think we could still safely say that we are in the era of Me Too. There is some accountability that's happening. A lot of people call it cancel culture. And a lot of folks respond, rightfully so, by saying, no, we're more interested in accountability. This is accountability culture. When names like Harvey Weinstein get thrown out there, Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, Jeffrey Epstein.
Sure.
You know, when these names are being thrown out there, this is not just a witch hunt. Obviously, we're talking about some real legal issues that are at play, and we have to still be kind of careful how we talk about it, because in the case of P. Diddy, these are just charges at this point that have been brought by a federal agency against him. So this is very serious. And, you know, we would not in any way make light of the charges that are out there. But I kind of want to get into, rather than just a gossip fest about the P. Diddy situation, which there is plenty of that. There's an abundance of that online. I want to get into a conversation about how we are dealing with these types of scandals in the public sphere. And more specifically, if you have been online in the last few weeks, you are probably familiar with the name Jaguar Wright. And can you explain to them who Jaguar Wright would be? Because I think you know more about her origins than I do, Greg.
Based in Philadelphia, she was basically an extended member of the Roots at one time, coming to prominence in the late 1990s, right around the time of the ascendance of Bad Boy Records, which is Sean Combs, Puffy's label. The Roots were not on Bad Boy, but again, they were, moving in some of the same circles because, hip hop was becoming what it is now, essentially. But I think it's very interesting here in the most recent times. Some of these videos on YouTube that Jaguar Wright has done have exploded They were already big before this particular scandal and occurrence, but now more eyes are on her because allegedly she seems to have been the spy eye on the scene. A lot of people are saying, well, to what degree was she really involved? How would she know all this information? How often was she at this situation?
So if you haven't seen these videos, I'll just summarize what the content that Jaguar Wright has been putting out there. And I was not aware of her, honestly, before this whole thing with the charges against Diddy. I was not aware of who Jaguar Wright was, I'll have to admit. But just to kind of summarize what she's been putting out there, she has been accusing certain people within the music industry, a lot of folks that are connected to P. Diddy, has been making some pretty serious accusations about sexual abuse, all kinds of violence, and even murder in some cases. She's accused a few celebrities of outright murder. And I have to admit, when I first saw these videos start to pop up in my social media feeds on TikTok and on Instagram, I was pretty fascinated. I was pulled in. You know, it's fascinating to hear someone who has at least some cursory connection to someone into these huge names in the industry, actually drop names and give real information and places, and not be sort of talking in this ginger way that people have to when they're worried about avoiding a lawsuit. She does not seem to be concerned about the legal ramifications of what she is doing. And so far, this has existed mostly online. But then there's been a shift here recently. Can you tell them about how things have kind of started to change up, Greg?
YouTube has made great strides in providing access for many folks to not only give their opinion, but to be rewarded for their opinion.
Right.
YouTube, Instagram, any form of social media has provided access and now competes with mainstream media. That's something that I think we need to identify and underline in red. Mainstream media is looking to folks like you, Dara, who blew up on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and famous YouTubers, regardless of their discipline, to be able to come on now as sources. I'll just say it. Whether they're degreed or not, whether they're experienced or not, the numbers are dictating the cachet. So numbers are saying, you are pulling your own ratings. That's enough for us to entertain the possibility of having you on mainstream media. Now, we were taught through our training not to haphazardly book a source based on his or her popularity. We wanted to make sure that they were authentic. What does that mean? That they were represented by a university, that they're a leader in their field, that somehow their connection to a story as a source of information was more than just popularity. Okay. That is shifting because, again, dollars, numbers are basically equal currency. So Piers Morgan took a chance on Jaguar Wright because she has what? The numbers. She has the attention. Maybe she's in this field. She would be able to speak to this situation because we don't know. Maybe this is someone who really was an eyewitness to this situation because the numbers support her in this scenario. So the arresting thing for me, having Jaguar Wright on the Piers Morgan show, which is really half gossip anyhow, was the fact that they would take a risk with conspiracy theory on a major national platform.
Yeah, and I think the issue with the Piers Morgan show, and you guys should remember, Piers Morgan, I think for several years, he's British, but for several years, I think he had a show on CNN, and he ended up, I think, being fired from CNN because of some irresponsible comments that were made. He's not exactly known for being the most progressive or enlightened host, and that's part of what makes him popular. But I think he got in a little bit over his head with this Jaguar Wright interview. So he had her on to basically do what she has been doing online, which is burning up. I mean, she has been running up some numbers on multiple podcasts. And as Touré, we watched a few videos that Touré did on this. And I think I'm going to throw in one of those videos that Touré did, just sharing his comments right here. And then we'll be right back to finish having this conversation about Jaguar Wright.
Jay-Z and Beyonce's attorney was on TMZ. He said he didn't send a cease and desist. He sent what some would call a threat letter. He said either take out the parts accusing my clients of things they did not do, or we'll get a court to make you do that. The reason why this actually would work is because Jaguar Wright has no receipts. The lawyer said putting her on Piers Morgan elevated her rumor mongering to journalism. People have repeatedly asked, why hasn't Jaguar Wright been sued? But the real question at this point is, why is it when the least bit of legal scrutiny was applied to Jaguar's claims, both Piers Morgan and her had to run away from them? If she had receipts, if she had the truth on her side, this would not matter. She could say, hey, I can go into a court of law and prove this, or at least make a case. She doesn't have any receipts. I'm not saying this because I'm being paid by Jay and Beyonce. I'm saying this because what Jaguar has been saying has been crazy. And it's fine for her to YouTube her wild stuff down there in the fever swamps of the internet. But when you want to come up into journalism world, which Piers Morgan is barely not even journalism world, but it looks like journalism world. When you want to come into that, you got to have some receipts for what you're saying, or shut up.
So as Toure points out, Piers Morgan wanted to be able to take advantage of a lot of the traffic that Jaguar Wright was generating, a lot of the numbers, as Greg was saying, and the excitement, just something to get in on that is going to bring him ratings. That's really what Piers Morgan was interested in. And he is not necessarily known as being the most journalistically accurate person himself. But for Jay-Z and Beyonce's lawyer to have to step in and bring some corrective action, that is the shift that happens when you bring this kind of thing from the online sphere to the major media sphere. So we're going to play Piers Morgan's statement for you here after Jay-Z and Beyonce's lawyer jumped in and said, hey, not so fast. We do not appreciate you bringing this person on to spread misinformation, lies, and conspiracy theories. Here's Piers Morgan.
Last week, I interviewed Jaguar Wright, a singer-songwriter who's made claims about Diddy for years. Those claims had already received a lot of attention in the media across many platforms for many years. And that's the thing about platforms. The reality of the modern world is that pretty much everyone has a platform as long as they have something to say that other people want to hear. That's why we invited her on to be interviewed. The people making these claims have an audience with or without shows like mine. Well, Jaguar Wright unexpectedly made several serious allegations about Jay-Z and Beyonce during that interview. As I said in the moment, they were not present to respond or defend themselves, but now they have. Their lawyers contacted us to say that those claims were totally false and have no basis in fact, and we've therefore complied with the legal request to cut them from the original interview. Editing interviews is not something we do lightly at a show called Uncensored. But, like the proverbial cries of fire in a crowded theatre, there are legal limits on us too. And we apologise to Jay-Z and Beyonce.
So that's Piers Morgan regretfully having to backtrack a bit and apologize for allowing Jaguar Wright to try and bring the same kind of ethos and energy that she was displaying online to a major corporation owned by Rupert Murdoch.
And let's again put a pin in that. I'm so glad you said that. Rupert Murdoch is Piers Morgan's boss. Rupert Murdoch deals in rags, as we say in the business, gossip columns, magazines that were part fantasy, part reality. So you would think that this would be something that they would be very interested in. But what draws the most attention is the fact that lawyers are now involved, specifically for not limited purpose public figures, but huge stars. It's difficult to prove slander or libel if you are a public figure.
Right.
Okay. One of the early lessons that we learned in school for mass media law was this: malice is the issue. That's the deciding factor of awarding a lawsuit to a person who is famous or notable. Most of the time, they have to take it on the chin. These are public people. They're in public discourse. They are putting themselves up by nature of their job for scrutiny or criticism. It is very hard to prove an opinion against them. The situation here is, what is malice? Malice is saying someone is sick when they're not sick and you have no evidence of that. B is saying that they have done something nefarious, committed a crime, a felony, and you have no proof of said felony or criminal activity. Jaguar Wright could be held, in my opinion, responsible for defamation or libel based on just that right there. Where are the receipts? You heard Toure talk about receipts. There are none. We don't know the level of Jay-Z or Beyonce's involvement in this situation. So they were within their rights to send their lawyer after somebody. Now, my question is, even though Jaguar Wright is not rich, why not shut down Jaguar Wright? Because she could be given the cease and desist. She could be sued. She could be crippled. And probably they would win their judgment because there is no evidence behind her claim.
Yeah, I think in these types of situations, when you're dealing with people who are super famous and even some people who are not as famous, because she's made some allegations against so many people, but she's made some slanderous statements against, for instance, Tevin Campbell, R&B singer Tevin Campbell, who has put out a statement that basically said, if you do not stop this right now, you can look to hear from my legal representation. So I think when you're dealing with super famous people at the level that Jay-Z or Beyonce are at, there is so much that's said about them in the online sphere. It would be ridiculous for them to be playing whack-a-mole with everyone who had something negative or libelous or slanderous to say about them. It would be utterly ridiculous. But Jaguar Wright is obviously kicking up a lot of dust at this point. And I think the point that Toure made in a later video was, well, a lot of people are asking why they didn't go after her before now, because she's been at this for months, really.
Right.
And even before that, I think. But why have none of these celebrities come back and filed lawsuits? And a lot of people are saying, well, that means it's probably true. You know, they're not coming back and blah, blah, blah. And that is a game of whack-a-mole that it is ridiculous to get involved in. And celebrities have to make those decisions all the time. Do I give this more gas? Do I draw more attention to it? And there's something called the Barbra Streisand effect, which is a celebrity choosing to engage in illegal action or do something publicly that tries to stop someone from taking action against them, that ends up drawing more attention to the thing. I won't even bother to get into why this is called the Barbra Streisand effect. But this is something that celebrities and their publicists have to make these decisions about all the time. So up till now, this kind of thing has existed, at least with Jaguar Wright, online. But when it got into the sphere where Greg said Rupert Murdoch, he deals in these rags, Sky News, the New York Post, Fox News, dubious news sources. This is his stock and trade.
It's entertainment.
Yeah, he doesn't mind getting into the entertainment news of it all. But when you have Jay-Z and Beyonce's lawyer reaching out and saying, hey, you went too far. You had somebody on that was saying too much, doing too much. The lawyer says he did not send a cease and desist letter. What he sent was a quote unquote threat letter. This is something that's referred to as a threat letter in the legal profession. When you push it to that limit, you can expect for those things to be addressed. And so I think the point that Toure was making was the reason that a lot of these people are not coming after her is this Barbra Streisand effect. Do we want to draw more attention to this kind of, Toure calls her mentally unstable. I don't know what his basis would be for referring to her in that way. But do we want to call attention to this person who's making these outlandish claims? Or do we just want to allow this to blow over and just be another one of those internet things? Or do we want to actually go in and have our legal experts start making statements about it, which they did?
It's interesting you mentioned Barbra Streisand, Dara, because Carol Burnett, someone who you also hold in high esteem, the esteemed comedian, actress, author, won her defamation suit and set precedent. So Beyonce and Jay-Z's lawyers are full within their rights to pursue Piers Morgan, Rupert Murdoch, or anyone else for that matter they feel has caused actual defamation based on malice.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to prove, like you said, with a public figure defamation. That's a very high standard. But it was with, I believe, another Rupert Murdoch publication, The Inquirer. That was who she sued back in the day. I don't remember what exactly the lie was that they told about her. But it is an unusual thing for a celebrity to go after a gossip rag, to go after a news station and say, you have defamed my character. We're going to pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. It is an unusual thing. Carol Burnett decided to do it and actually won. And I think if you decide to do it, you better know that you're standing on very firm legal ground, because it will set a precedent. And that creates ripples throughout the industry. And there's a reason that a lot of these celebrities don't really bother with this stuff. And I think that's a shame. This gets into another part of the conversation that really is of particular interest to me and always has been, because I think I've always had kind of a special fascination with celebrity culture. I love reading memoirs and autobiographies of these people and seeing them as people.
Right.
You know, not simply seeing them as these untouchable figures that are products of a PR machine. And to some degree, they are.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, these are human beings who have real feelings, and some of them varying levels of wealth or fame. Some of them may be famous enough to be insulated from it all. So for some of them, you hear them actually talk about how these accusations can truly be hurtful and damaging
True.
to their reputations. And so I try to keep that in mind, you know, kind of balancing that out with my fascination with their celebrity. But they're real people, just like I am. And it's okay to consider them as real people. But I think, especially in this age of social media, I think in the age of so-called cancel culture, which a lot of people would say is really accountability culture, I think we've made a shift, and it probably happened several years ago. I think this accountability culture came to a head probably on Twitter, I would say, was the epicenter for this kind of thing, using our collective voices as people who exist in these online spaces to hold powerful people to account. And when it works, it's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing to be able to say, you know what? Celebrity A, B, or C.
Or corporations. We are not going to deal with this behavior any longer. We are tired of providing you with immunity. No, you will not receive our dollars. No, you will not receive our attention. And if you should be subject to criminal prosecution for your behavior, then we're going to hold you to account for that. Like, your celebrity and your money is not going to be enough to protect you. Mm-hmm.
So I think there was kind of a golden age, as it were, of that, which probably happened on Twitter. I would say really 2009, 2010 Twitter, where people were starting to understand the power of collective action. All of these little guys banding together and putting their force behind, you know, we got to boycott this corporation over here, or refuse to buy this product, or go to this comedian's show, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really cool thing, actually, to witness and to understand that we the people, had that power. But I think the ecosystem, has had a real overcorrection in the past 10 years or so, unfortunately, I would say, where I think a lot of that culture, that sort of cancel culture, some people would call it accountability culture, has become quite toxic. A lot of it, in my estimation, and in a lot of people's estimation, and I don't come from the perspective of, you know, well, you can't say anything, and cancel culture has ruined everything, and this Me Too movement, and oh my God, and we don't know, they can just make any accusation they want to. No, that's really not where I'm coming from. If it's a valid accusation, then great, let's call it out and let's hold people responsible. But I think the age that we've gotten into now, unfortunately, it just has become big business, and there are a lot of people making money off of the gossip industry online, the exposure industry, the pile-on culture. It just has gotten to a point where collectively we have become a group of bullies.
I will agree with you to a certain extent. I see exactly what you've laid out for us, Dara. But where I push back slightly is just what you said just a sentence or so ago, or a paragraph or so ago. The fact that these people are being called out at all has been the result of a collective unity. And I think there have been bullying on the other side for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what we're talking about here in the case of a possible or alleged criminal activity stretching back for however long this man's reign has been in the music business.
Mm-hmm.
Think about how many others.
Oh, I'm certainly not suggesting that P. Diddy is being bullied, not by any means.
No, but what we're saying is, in general, the bad old days of the 90s had plenty of mistreatment and bullying of women, of minorities, of children,
absolutely,
of LGBTQ members. I feel in general that this accountability situation has basically said, we're not going to settle for mistreatment on one hand, where we weren't hearing that 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There was more of a tendency to be quiet, to hush about it, to deal with your own trauma yourself, to be so embarrassed as to be frozen or
Yeah.
immobilized. But I think that having social media, one of the good things about it is to be able to fight against the toxicity.
Mhm.
And I don't think that we necessarily should say automatically that it is completely out of control. This has given us a new sense of empowerment. It has also put famous people on check or on notice.
Absolutely. And I fully agree with that. I think there's been a super positive effect of this. And this is probably a reflection of how much time I spend online versus how much time you spend online.
That's
I think
fair.
I'm probably a
Very
little bit more
fair.
plugged into these. I'm not a big Twitter person, but I am probably more aware of the culture that is developed
Mm-hmm.
on a site like Twitter than you would be. You make a lot less investment in this stuff,
Yeah,
and that's probably
more
a lot
traditional
healthier.
media.
Right. That's a lot healthier for you
Mhm.
as a human being. I think it would be a lot healthier for a whole lot of people if they were less invested in this kind of thing online. But really what I'm speaking of is what has come in the wake of a lot of the healthy version of this, that which you're referring to,
Okay.
which is, yes, let's hold wealthy and powerful people to account. Now, what we've slipped into in the age that we're in now, in places like YouTube, TikTok, Twitter specifically, just the online sphere, period, is we've slipped into an era where if you look at the comments of any of these Jaguar Wright videos, she's lobbing accusations here, there, and everywhere as irresponsibly as anyone could possibly lob these kinds of accusations. Like I said, all kinds of sexual misconduct. And we obviously know the charges that are being levied against Diddy. That's a legal matter that is already out there in the public sphere, but she's expanding that to throwing out all kinds of names that the Justice Department has not even,
Sure.
this is just pure, as I would think of it, pure unadulterated gossip. And I'm wondering how we moved into an era where someone sharing pure unadulterated gossip, even if it is about celebrities, was just something that we were so ready to consume without question. And obviously the era of gossip rags, gossip magazines, this goes all the way back to Dominique Dunn and Luella Parsons. And I'm trying to remember the name of the other famous gossip columnist. But this is a long-standing tradition in Hollywood. This is not anything new. But to see these comment sections where this woman is, in my opinion, very irresponsibly accusing a bunch of folks of a bunch of stuff that we really have no substantiation for. She does not have actual receipts. She just claims to have been in the room.
But people feel empowered now to say the quiet part out loud. And that's what social media has given us, an equal platform with the right amount of likes, views, clicks, or under someone else's platform with the right amount of views, likes, clicks. Your voice can be amplified.
Right.
So that was not a situation we had before 2005. That was a situation where we're dealing again in traditional media. There's a buffer, there's a barrier of
Right.
entry where we can't raise our voice with the same level of velocity that the other persons on this side of the microphone can do. There's a quickness with how news travels, but there's also a power with how news travels. And I think in both cases, traditional media was the megaphone that we didn't have access to. Many of us still don't. But we do have access to social media, which empowers us, again, as you're arguing now, to become our own gang, our own set,
Yeah.
our own crew,
It's the pylon
to
thing.
be able to say, look, you're not doing it like we want, or we have some questions, or we always did. Now we're raising our voices together, and you're going to be our victim. We're going to take you down because you're the flavor of the month. You cannot underestimate the power of new media, of social media. And it can be used as the vehicle for really great things or really horrendous, toxic things.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I have two things that I want to point out, and I kind of want to get your perspective of. First of all, I'll ask you, and I hope you can retain these two things because I need you to retain them because I'm not going to do a very good job
Let's
retaining
take
them.
the A question
First
first.
of all, well, let me throw them both out, and then maybe we'll
Let's
both
take
remember
A
the B
first.
part of it. First of all, you as being someone who is involved more so in traditional media, your training is in news. You have expertise in PR and all of this stuff. And so this does get into a lot of the territories that you have been trained in traditional media to be able to address. And we're in the age now where a lot of celebrities don't even have publicists. They don't even have PR agents. Social media is taking the place of a lot of this stuff. Back in the day, people like Luella Parsons and Dominique Dunn, these were gossip columnists. And the entire industry had to sort of come and bow to these people. They dealt directly with publicists. And, the whole system was just different back in the day, where publicists were power players in the industry. And so now a lot of that infrastructure is being replaced with social media. And so I'd like to know, on one hand, how you feel as someone who has been a part of that traditional media structure. How do you feel about that shift? How effective has it been in holding people accountable or in preventing this sort of gossip culture from taking over?
I appreciate that, because that's a heavy question in one sense. My short answer would be that there are still publicists involved. I deal with many of them every day in my line of work, but where you're seeing a change or shift is in new stars, new people who have been made by social media initially. Those folks sometimes have less of a filter, if you will, human filter, in how they deal with the press. A lot of times you can deal with someone directly on inbox or DM, and they may write you back if they see your inquiry or if you snarl at them in the right way on the comments. But I don't think we're in the age where publicists have completely gone away, although their powers have been minimized based on the level of cachet of a given celebrity.
So you don't necessarily feel like the shift away from publicists and towards more of this like social media conversation directly from the celebrity to their audience and directly from the audience to these celebrities, you don't necessarily feel like that's necessarily affected them in the way that it has affected newer celebrities.
I think people who were brought up in the old system before 2000, they have someone that tells them or advises them how to speak.
Yeah,
now,
we don't see Sean Penn and Denzel Washington and Julia Roberts like making all kinds of ridiculous statements on social media. They know how to handle themselves the old school way.
They've had the training, they have the insight, and whether they choose to do that is a forceful and cognizant decision. If they do that, you won't find that often, though. Absolutely not. Very rare. But again, post 2005. You'll see a lot of folks making a lot of rookie mistakes, as I would say, because they don't have that literacy.
What is the effect that you think that's had on celebrity culture in general?
I think, again, that it has empowered more so than anyone else the common person without access to traditional media. I think in general, people are saying my message, if amplified, can get to the widest amount of people. And if I'm in my feelings or if I'm hot about a certain topic, that's good for me because I want it to get out. They don't know about damage control. They're not cognizant of being able to think 2 or 3 moves down. What did you say the other day? They're playing checkers and not chess. That's a new phenomenon with new celebrities, because dealing with press, dealing with public, dealing with their image is a moment-to-moment thing. That's what social media is. It's not built for the long game. It's built for 1 hour.
Well, the other part of the question that I want to ask you, and I kind of want to elucidate, I hope I'm using that word correctly, the situation with Diddy a little bit further, because if you all are not on TikTok, TikTok can be kind of a silly place where people do little dances. And like I said, some of this horrible gossip culture is very much lives on platforms like that, but it can also be a great place to share information and to learn more about all kinds of topics. So I saw a video that came up on my TikTok about the Diddy situation that gave me some information about it that I didn't know. And I'd kind of like to get your thoughts on this question that I just asked within the context of this information that I'm getting ready to share with you. So a lot of people asked, this situation with Diddy, this stuff goes back 25, some of it 30 years. I mean, this is a long-standing situation. A lot of people are asking at this point, why now? Why all of a sudden are these charges coming up? And I guess in the back of my mind, I'm attributing a lot of it to social media culture, Me Too culture. It's just time and people are being held accountable. I'm not really deeply following the story, so I hadn't really thought a whole lot about the why. But there was a TikToker that shared some really interesting information as to the why now question. So they said these are rumors about him that have been spreading, that have been circulating for years, especially within the industry. And even, with regular people like us, we've heard little murmurings of like, Lord knows what's going on in these situations. What this person had made a point about, and there have been a couple of other celebrities, I think 50 Cent and a couple of other people who have come out recently and said, the real issue was not necessarily that people didn't know what was going on, or even that the Justice Department, the FBI, the federal government might not have been tipped off and aware of a lot of the stuff. And the Justice Department was probably not going to be the first entity that someone goes to when they know that there is inappropriate sexual activity happening. So let's just be fair about that. But the Justice Department was not brought into this until very recently, probably in the last year or so. What this person is saying is that P. Diddy has a relationship with the liquor company Ciroc. Many people think he owns that company. He does not. He has been a paid spokesperson for Ciroc for many years now. And they were not doing much business at all, selling maybe 50,000 of those units per year. He comes in and now they're into the millions, selling millions of units per year. He has done wonders for the Ciroc brand. I believe what happened, what this person on TikTok was saying is that he had made some disparaging comments about Ciroc and something about them not really giving him his just due for the prominence that he had helped their brand to achieve, and had started, quote unquote, biting the hand that fed him. This company is owned by some very powerful people. And suddenly after Diddy makes these statements, I think he actually sued them. He sued them, filed a suit against them earlier this year. Within a very short period of time, the Cassie accusations come out, or the video of him abusing the singer Cassie come out. And all of this Justice Department stuff starts. So the speculation, we have to really make it clear this is still in the territory of speculation and rumor. But I think it's hard to deny that the timing of that would be very interesting. And like I said, Diddy and a couple of other celebrities have really come right out and said, hey, you can unfortunately do these women wrong and carry on with all this craziness if you have enough money and enough celebrity to protect you. But when you start going after the truly powerful, and this is, again, an example of what Jaguar Wright did. If you're doing things at this level over here, you can get away with it for so long. Once you start bringing this into another sphere where people really are starting to pay attention who have power, you're affecting people with power, this is going to have a very different set of implications and consequences for you. You know, that's kind of the conventional thinking at this point, is that he is suffering the consequences that he is suffering right now, not because people were not aware of what he was doing, but because the very powerful corporation that he is connected to, he went after them legally. And so I say all that to say this, I keep referring to accountability culture. We feel that what we are doing is the right thing. It's a good thing. We have the ability to do this, to put our collective efforts together and go after this celebrity or go after that one, which I feel like it's getting really into a point where it's out of control because we're not just talking about Diddy anymore.
Right.
Folks are, who's on the list? Who's on the list? Who did what? Who was at the parties? I feel like what really is addressing the nefarious behavior, that all happened at a corporate level. That all happened within the halls of power after he went after a very powerful organization. And then all of a sudden, another very powerful organization, which is the Justice Department and the FBI, start to get involved. And so really, when we're talking about someone like Diddy being held accountable for what he did, our collective effort had nothing to do with it. Ultimately, it was only when he ran afoul of a powerful corporation that he started to be held accountable. So how valuable is this accountability culture? I mean, is it accomplishing anything other than just creating a generation of gossips? This is my concern, is because to look in the comments section of these Jaguar Wright videos, it's the most irresponsible thing that you could ever possibly hope to witness. We just have absolutely no discernment or desire to have discernment around who we are accusing of God knows what. It doesn't seem like any of us are truly interested in justice or accountability for actual wrongdoing. We just want to see the show. We just got our popcorn bags out. Are we accomplishing anything with this, what I would think of as pile-on culture? And, you know, are we moving in the right direction with this?
Well, you're going back to square one, and I guess you're probably saying no, that we aren't making very much progress after a point. I think that it's useful to a point, and then after that, it's just a pile on. Diddy fortunately or unfortunately, is also a victim of white supremacy, in my opinion, because that's what trumps his wealth. He was able, unfortunately, to get away with alleged nefarious things for 25 years. But what had it stop? It wasn't the black person going to the police and saying, hey, because he intimidated nearly all of them. But when a white corporation basically says, no, you will not slap us down, we still have control over you and we will make you submit. And that's what has happened, in my opinion. White supremacy has trumped wealth. Under wealth is probably accountability culture, because at the end of the day, as much as we raise our voices, there are powerful people that are going unchecked because they have the legal stamina and wealth to be able to avoid what we're talking about. So in my opinion, that's the hierarchy.
Well, I can't necessarily say that I disagree with you. I don't know that I would frame it that way myself, to say that Diddy is a victim of white supremacy. I think Diddy has transcended a lot of those racial dynamics. I think the fact that he was able to get away with what he got away with for so long is an indication that he and people like Bill Cosby, R. Kelly, and many others were able to transcend that racial hierarchy. When you have enough money, that really is not the primary consideration. But I think money trumps money. If a major multinational corporation comes after you as an individual who is, a billionaire, there's a limit to how far your money will get you. If you're coming after the wrong multinational corporation that has enough ties to other billionaires and investors who are like, hey, you are not going to mess up our money. You're not going to mess up our shareholders' money either with your shenanigans.
And I understand completely your point, but I stand by mine. I do, because I would like to see the makeup of that boardroom. And I would like to see their wealth against his, even on an individual basis.
Oh, we know what the makeup is.
So let's just say, we agreed to acknowledge each other's points. That may not have been how you would have framed it, but that's how I frame it. That's the hierarchy for me. White supremacy, then wealth, then accountability culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I'm ready to call a black billionaire a victim of white supremacy.
First of all, I don't agree with anything that he's been alleged to have done. Absolutely not. But the reason he was able to run so long was what you were saying, the wealth.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Trumps it all. Capitalism trumps it all. He was a victim of capitalism.
Okay.
I will absolutely get on board with that. But his capitalist foot has been stomping the necks of people like Cassie for 25 or 30 years.
100% agree.
Yeah,
with
I mean, something about the framing of the white supremacy and all of that. It's not to say that it's incorrect, because of course, when you say, do we know the makeup of the, well, of course we know that for the individuals behind these corporations,
and
we know what the makeup of those boards are.
It's tied to the capitalism that you speak of.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So we could elucidate issues around patriarchy and capitalism and misogyny and all kinds of things, racism. We know that there are many layers that kind of play into this whole situation, which is part of what makes it so fascinating. But I just want to thank you, Greg, for being here with us to kind of help us to understand these issues really from a media literacy perspective, a little bit better from a PR perspective. I always love evaluating situations like this from a bird's eye view, and one that helps us to understand the culture in which we live a little bit better. Thank you for being a part of the breakdown today.
Thanks for having me again. Proud of you, proud of this show, and everybody, please go vote. Please go vote.
Absolutely.
What's the website to register?
Vote.org, vote.org/DARA, DARA, to do your voter registration. Make sure that your voter registration is in order. Of course, we're coming down to the wire just a few weeks now. Early voting has started in a lot of places. Be getting in your ballots early if your state allows for early voting, in-person voting, or mail-in voting. Please take advantage of that already. In many states, hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots are already starting to be cast. The earlier those votes are cast, the earlier that they can be tabulated. I heard someone else, Jessica Craven, who's another content creator, she made the point that the earlier that you get in your mail-in votes, if you are in a place where canvassing is being done, then the sooner you're being taken off those lists for canvassers to come by and knock on your door, or for phone bankers to be calling you. They can kind of start clearing out those lists as the voting day gets closer and as more people start casting their votes. So that's pretty cool to know that they're actually keeping very, very close track of, you know, who's cast votes and not keeping track of who you voted for. But if your ballot has come in, then you are being taken off of those lists, and they can allocate those resources to places that they are needed.
That's good news.
So thank you very much, Greg, for the reminder to vote. We know what time it is. We know what season it is. We're taking one little week off from even talking about election stuff. We'll be back next week, and I'm sure every week before the election to really stay plugged in with what is going on this election season. But I want to thank you all for joining us here on The Breakdown. My name is Dara Star Tucker. Greg, can you tell the people where to find you online?
Sure. GB_Watchman on Instagram and TikTok.
GB_Watchman. Find Greg Bryant online. He is also a musician. I don't even know if he said that at the beginning of the show, but he wears a lot of hats, and you'll probably be very interested to find out a little bit more about what he does. But thank you for joining us, Greg, and thank you all for joining me. I will see you all the same time, same place next week here on KGLH. Looking forward to talking to you again about the issues that matter. Until then, let's learn to shout.